Hey guys, welcome back to the Leverage Advantage show. And today I've got a very special guest with us. We're very humbled, honored, and grateful to have Denise Morris Kipnis with us. Now, she's an organizational development expert. And only recently I've realized how important organizational development is if you want to build a big business. Welcome, Denise. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, so I think a lot of people won't know that we actually recorded this episode maybe a couple of weeks ago, but the noise was so bad, so we have to reshoot it. But we had such a great conversation, and I just want to revive that conversation. But more importantly, I think it's really important for the audience to know more about you. So can you share a little bit about your story, how you came to become involved with organizational development?
Oh gosh, it's a long one. So the short version of it is I came to it very late. I wandered in the wilderness for a while before I figured out what I was supposed to be doing with my life. So originally I started out in operations, which was all about keeping the trains running on time. And even before that, I was always concerned about diversity and inclusion. Having spent most of my life being the only person in the room who looks like me, I've always been very interested in dynamics and communications and how people work together and how they don't, and watching people misunderstand each other in ways that they don't need to. So I've always been looking at collaboration spaces and innovation and creativity and that sort of thing, which gave me a better sense of like beginning, middle, and end to my work, and always a chance at the end to try and learn how to do it better. And usually project management is around efficiency or capturing costs or that sort of thing. But I really wanted to look at how do you build the best teams? How do you get the right people around you, the best talent to get work with you for the best solutions? So I went from project management to facilitation, but I was still missing that what's it all for? What's the big picture? I was missing the systems piece. And that's how I got to organization development. And so in the middle of the great financial crisis in 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there, I decided to just strike out and start my own consulting business. It's been 11 years, and there've been some interesting periods, but I'm happy to say I've been in Singapore for about almost 8 years now, and I'm still passionate about what I do.
That's awesome. I mean, I've been having a lot of interviews with people who decided to do something during the great financial crisis of 2008, and one of the things that really stands out is that I'm sure that there were tons of people, and there are so many people that are not notable, but the ones that did make it really shows me that there's huge opportunity when other people see crisis. One of the things that you mentioned just and the last time we had our conversation that really struck me was when you talked about inclusion in teams and in organizations, and that really opened my eyes. It was enlightening. It was a real revelation. Can you share a little bit more about why inclusion is so important and how can we embrace more inclusion in the workplace?
Okay. I'm trying to remember what our previous conversation was about, but since then I've also kind of reflected on where we were. So I would say, I think you asked me a question that was roughly like, what could small businesses do to sort of build the right cultures and get them to, what's an easy way for them to ramp up? If you're really intentional about building organizations in a way that's sustainable, what's the best way to do that? And I said inclusion. And what I was getting at is, when you think about inclusion, it's really about creating a system, an environment where people can do their best work, where they are able to contribute and they have an equal chance to succeed, right? So the playing field is level. When you do that, people give you their extra, they give you their all. If I know that you appreciate me and that you might actually act on my ideas, that gives me an incentive to really be committed, to really give you everything. And so I think the mistake a lot of organizations make right now is they want to focus on diversity. They want to focus on the numbers, on representation. Like, let's just get different people in the room. But they really struggle with how do you use all of that, right? If you got me in the room, but you're not going to listen to me, that's not inclusion. That's a waste of everybody's time. And that's happening, unfortunately, in a widespread basis. So in terms of how do you get to do that, I'm not going to lie, it is a very slow and thoughtful process because most people aren't used to thinking that way. They're not used to thinking, do I talk to the same kinds of people? Do the same kinds of people in my organization have power? Can I listen to people that I don't normally do? Can I accept ideas that aren't perfectly formed or perfectly packaged? Do I have my way or the highway, that sort of thing? And so part of it is just looking at I wouldn't really say that everybody has to go straight to organizational change. Maybe it has to do with a small team starts to be more inclusive, or a leader starts to be more inclusive, and they start this process of being curious about other people and being able to hear things in different ways.
I'll share with you a very, very personal story as well, because I was having a chat with some of my friends and their employees in another company that I'm affiliated with, and one of the things that really struck me, like we're just talking about inclusion, right? And actually, one of the biggest issues that particular organization is facing right now is a disparity between the remuneration and the and the work that's being done. There are people from a completely different division doing very similar work. They're getting paid multiple times what I mean multiple times, like almost 10 times, right? What people in a different division but doing the exact same work are doing, and because of that, the organization said there's a lot of distrust, there's a lot of resentment, and even the ones that are getting paid less start to question themselves as to whether or not their feelings are petty, right? And it's just it's not I think it's not conducive for any organization. But on the other hand, after having that chat with you also over those weeks ago, it really opened my eyes to let's talk about succession planning, right? And succession planning is so important for the growth of a company, because if we aren't able to replace ourselves, then we can't grow. And one of the things I've done since we had a chat is, we've made this, because I want to replace I want to have more creative directors in the company. In order for me to do that, I need to either hire or promote from within. And so we gave that opportunity to people that were already in the organization, and there were those that wanted to step up, wanted to learn. Of course, it's going to take time. It's going to take additional resources to train them to get to that level. But it's a worthwhile investment, because then we have that ability to grow. So, that's something I think it's a real life example of how putting into practice, like what you mentioned, in inclusion actually helps your company. How else, what do you think are other ways in which we can promote and embrace inclusion in the workplace? So what are some of the basic principles and tenets then that we need to be aware of when we build an organization?
Well, okay, so let me back up for a little bit. So my practice focuses on both organizational change and inclusion. So, and inclusion should always have, it's nice to make people feel, included and so forth, but each business should have a strategic reason for why they pay attention to these things, to any sort of people engagement strategy, right? Which is, have an idea of what you want to do with your business and what's the best way to get there. And so if inclusion is a piece of that, then go for it and invest in it at an appropriate level. If you really think you can survive not being an inclusive, organization, and I doubt it, I'm skeptical, but okay, then don't. I wouldn't say every single organization needs to pay attention to this stuff, but I do think every organization does need to figure out basically how to become more agile and looking at how it changes. And when you do that, so let's say something happens in your environment, you've got to go after a new customer, or there's some regulation that comes down that makes it harder for you to do your thing, or there's a new entrant, or you've been disrupted in some way, you're trying to figure out how to react to that. A lot of mistakes that companies make, they'll go to the usual suspects. I'll go to my guy, and it's usually a guy, unfortunately. But I'm going to go to my guy. He's going to help me out. We're going to brainstorm together. And in situations like that, where it's hitting the fan, you actually might want to go to maybe the girl or the other people on the team, because at this point, one of the mistakes that organizations make is they don't go to the people that actually know what's going on in the organization. So they don't go to the process owners. They don't go to the guys that are connected, that are part of the social network, that influence how things are going. And so, if you will, organization development says, as much as possible, get the whole system in the room when you're trying to design the program, your change, because the more data you have, the more you can see your context, what's going on around you, the more you're accurate about what's going on, the better off you'll be when you're trying to figure out how to fix it, or how to react or how to be proactive. And so that idea of bringing as many people as you can in the conversation that have the perspectives that you need, you can see how that's right up there with inclusion. For me, it's they're concentric circles. They're two sides of the same coin. I'm mixing metaphors, but you get my meaning. I don't do them separately, is what I'm saying. So if I get involved in inclusion, it's usually going to be, involve some sort of organizational change, right? If I get involved in organizational change, I'm going to do that inclusively. It's just, and I would suggest that organizations don't treat them as separate conversations, because that's when your head explodes and you think you have, two major things to do at the same time. Think of them as, perhaps the same effort, and that might be a little bit easier to get it done.
Awesome. I've got an important question, right? So
Yeah.
A lot of the audience that watches the show, a lot of them are small business owners, and a lot of them are, say, one-man shows. And for them, in order to grow, in order to start leverage, they're going to need to make their first hire, right? I'm not even sure if you're the right person to ask this question to, but I'm just going to ask it anyway, right? So how does one decide to? First of all, here's the thing. I know from experience, hiring and making your first hire, going from a partnership or from a business owner or one-man show, requires a huge mindset shift. It requires a huge value shift as well, and it requires a lot of trust. But how does one decide what their first hire should be?
Go ahead. Why don't you just ask me where the gold is? I don't know. I mean, this is a difficult question. So listen, here's the thing. So I like context, right? So I'll give you a little bit of context. When I started the business 11 years ago, it was with a not-for-profit that had one employee, and a team of volunteers. And I've been blessed over 11 years to work my way up to multinationals. But I still have a soft spot in my heart for the small organizations, because, you're not as entrenched. I mean, if something's going to change in a small organization, you can pretty much do it in the same day. If you're going to try and change something in a multinational, you've got to ask a bunch of people about it. It takes time. There's politics, there's bureaucracy, there's red tape, there's all of that, right? So there's something really special and really wonderful about the flexibility. And part of it is it just hasn't happened yet. That kind of complexity hasn't happened yet to a smaller business. I would say one of the most controversial things I'm probably ever going to say is don't pay so much attention to the job description. Pay attention to the mindset, like you've said, because especially if you're a small business and you're trying to think about your sustainability, think about, do I have the right kind of person who's going to grow with me? Do I have somebody who can adapt and change, as opposed to somebody who can absolutely hit all the dots on my job description? That's not important, because especially if it's a technology field, that tech is going to change so fast. So it doesn't matter that you're the master of this or that. I used to be a master of SharePoint 2007. Nobody cares right now. Right? So what you really want to know is what are the capabilities that you're going to need to grow this organization bigger? And if you don't know what those are, then at least, hire somebody that you think is going to be flexible enough to figure it out. Somebody who likes to learn and grow.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is more hire for attitude rather than hire for skills. The skills you can.
Behaviors. Go for behaviors or competencies. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Tell me what excites you most about your industry?
So I used to be a project manager, and that was all about getting it just right. It was about design, right? So I can literally build you a process for anything. I can break it down in little pieces. That's one of my superpowers, right? But the thing that used to always throw it apart every single time is people. People get involved and things go sideways. And that can be remarkably frustrating, but that can also be so fantastic, because you never know what could happen. Something really interesting and could emerge. So at the time, it might feel like a terrible roadblock. It might feel like a catastrophe at the time. And then you find out, you know what? We were going in the wrong direction. That person really made us pivot and think a little bit better. And now we can do something differently. So it's the variety of it. And even with it on a good year, I work with multiple clients at a time, because I like the variety of it. I like the flexibility. I like the change of it. So, like the complexity. Okay, chaos. Chaos. Okay.
I love that. I think that's one of the questions we asked. I asked in the earlier conversation, and yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. Tell me, how do you unwind? You know, you're in Singapore now.
Yeah.
And how do you, because we don't have, like, you know, unlike a lot of other places, where the landscape in Singapore is not very diverse. It's just tall buildings and the waterfront if you're lucky. How do you unwind?
So, I mean, I take issue with this. Like, I've been in Singapore for 8 years, and I feel like I still get off on a particular bus stop, or I get off the MRT, or I turn a corner and I find something new all the time, you know, or I connect the city in a different way. Like, when I was in the States, I used to drive, and that was, my commute was kind of my way of unwinding. You know, it took me, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes to get there, 30, 40 minutes to come back, and I'm alone in the car with the music up as loud as I possibly can, right? But because of that driving, you're really familiar with the streets and how it all connects. Here in Singapore, I'm a pedestrian, you know, like, I don't have a car. So it's still this process of, like, literally going under the ground and popping up and seeing something new. And that's interesting to me. But I also have to admit, as much as I love working with people, I have limited capacity for that. I'm an introvert, so I like to spend a lot of time alone. So the things that I love to do, I can do them anywhere. You know, I like to still read. I love my music. I have a soundtrack to everything. I've always got headphones in. I love my science fiction. I've seen more bad movies than you can count. And when they're good, I'm pleased. And when they're bad, I'm still pleased. You know, I read about science fiction all the time. Because, you know, it's about an alternate reality that's not that far away from where we are right now. And I, you know, I do need to keep a red wine budget in the house. You know? I need that. So, and, you know, I've got a toddler, and so honestly, sometimes just going out and playing around with her is really a good way to shake off, you know, other people's problems, which is what I carry as a consultant. It's what we all carry, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank you so much for spending the time with us. I really appreciate it. I think we had it's a very condensed, it's a very information dense conversation that we had. I really appreciate you taking the time again to record this and share that knowledge with the audience. Right? Thank you so much, Denise.
No, and thanks for doing this. It's such a great service, and I love the way you are building community through this podcast. It's great.
Hey there, thanks so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, check out a relevant video here, and don't forget to subscribe to us for more marketing tips, techniques, strategies that are working for us, or just more behind the scenes fun. See ya!